Hey guys, we're here with the notes for function notation. That's 2.2, and we are on page 47. So if you would, take a second, pause the screen, write what you see, and press play when you're ready. Wonderful. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is the difference between an equation and a function. An equation means that our problem starts with y equals. A function means we start with f of x. So I'm going to write the words up here. This is how we read it. F of x. Okay, we don't say the words parentheses, we say f of x. Basically, that symbol means y equals. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference is we use that symbol when we have x's and y's. So we need to be very clear about who's the input and who's the output. Each question you do today, you're going to have to circle which one you have in order to make the decision about solving or simplifying. So let's talk about it this way. If you have the number inside the parentheses, then you have the input, you have the x. If that's the case, all you're going to do is plug it in. So let's show you what that looks like. I'm going to use this equation right here. Okay? If I know what the x is, then I'm going to write it out. 2, plug in my x plus 5. I don't have any variables right here. So I can tap that whole thing into my calculator, or I can simplify it one at a time. What is 2 times negative 3? That's a negative 6. Plus 5 gives us a negative 1. Okay, so I had my x. This is my y. If I'm going to write an answer, it would say f of negative 3, that's my x number, gave me the answer negative 1. That's my y. Okay? So if you have the parenthesis number, the x, you're plugging it into the equation, and you're just simplifying. No canceling. You could honestly type the whole thing in your calculator. Okay? All right, let's talk about the difference between that and solving. Solving means you're canceling something out. So if you have the number on the outside of the parentheses, then you have the y. If you have the y value, you're going to set it equal. Okay? So if I take that same problem, I have 2x plus 5. I don't know what the x is. What I know is what the problem needs to equal. Okay? So I'm setting it equal to that y value. Let's go ahead and solve this. If I'm trying to solve for x, I need to kick the loner out of the party. That means I'm kicking out the 5. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Subtract 5 on both sides gives me 2x equals a negative 8. I need to get x by itself. Cancel out the 2. I need to divide. Divide by 2 on both sides. The 2 cancels out. Excuse me. And my answer is going to come out to be x equals a negative 4. Once I have the x number, now I can write an answer. So my next question is, what does an answer actually look like? Well, you write the f of x, so you put the x number in the parenthesis, and it equals the y. So right now, if I have an x value here and a y value here, my answer would look like this. F of negative 4, that's my x, equals my y, negative 3. Okay? If I was to write this as an ordered pair, my x would go first, negative 4, comma, negative 3. That would be my point on the graph. Both of these can be an answer, okay? All right, if you need to pause it for just a second, write that down. Otherwise, we're moving to the bottom. Wonderful. All right, so each time we do a problem, I want you to identify who's the input, who's the output. Here's the easiest way to check. If it's in the parentheses, it's your input. If it's outside of the parentheses, it's your output, okay? So let's go through problem 1. Problem 1, I have the input, so I'm going to plug it in. It means I'm going to take that 2, and I'm going to plug him in where that x is. My work is going to look like negative 4, plug in 2, plus 3. Notice that the x is gone. I know what x is. I don't need to put the variable. We're going to go ahead and put this in our calculator. Type it in, negative 4, parenthesis 2, close parenthesis, plus 3. You can type all of that in at the same time. When I do that, I'm going to get a negative 5. So I'm going to take this part of the problem, I'm going to bring it down, and my answer looks like this. F of 2 equals -5. Okay? Let's try number 2. Number 2, I have the output. So I'm going to take that 12 and I'm going to set my equation equal to 12. So I write out my equation, -4x plus 3 equals 12. I need to solve that. Kick the loner out of the party, subtract 3 from both sides. That gives us -4x equals 9. We're going to divide on both sides, -4, divide by -4. 4's cancel out. It's okay that it's a fraction. We're going to let it stay a fraction. Let's go ahead and write our answer. This is my equal to, so I bring that number down. I know that my x is the fraction -9/4. So I'm going to plug it in where the x is. F of -9/4 equals 12. Okay? Perfect. Let's go ahead and go on to number 3. Number 3, do you have the input or the output? Perfect. You have the output. Now I want you to look real close right here. I'm going to color it in pink. Right here, do you see how the letter changed? See how now it's a G? That tells me that I'm using a different function. The ones up top were f of x, so we use the f equation. The ones on the bottom are g of x. We use the g equation. Okay? All right, so on this one, I have the output. So I want to make sure that I am setting it equal to 19. We're going to write it out. 5x minus 1 equals 19. Let's solve this out. Kick the loner out of the party. We're adding 1 to both sides. 5x equals 20. Get the x by itself, we need to divide by 5 on both sides. And we get x equals 4. Now, when I write my answer, remember I need function notation. So we're going back to g of, who's my x number? That's a 4, equals 19. That number I already had. Okay, going on to number 4. Do you have the input or the output? If it's in the parentheses, you have the input. Okay, so let's go ahead and take that -6 and we are going to plug it into the equation. So I'm taking 5, plug in my x number, minus 1. I can type this whole thing in a calculator. 5 times -6 minus 1. When I do that, I get -31. Okay, we're going to bring this whole thing down here. G of -6, I had all of that, but now I know it equals -31. Okay, pause the video for just a second if you need to write anything down. I'll meet you on the back. Okay. All right, back page. We're still doing the same thing, but I want to show you a couple of extra tricky problems. So let's try number 5. When you see this 2, is he the input or the output? Hopefully you said the input. He's in the parentheses. So I'm going to plug that 2 in where my x is. So I'm going to write down 30, plug in that 2. Remember that this symbol means divide. So if I do 30 divided by 2, I'm saying that's 15. There's no variables. I can put it in the calculator. I already have this part, so h of 2 equals 15. Okay? All right, let's try number 6. I see the -10. Is it the input or the output? It's on the outside of the parentheses, so he's the output. That means that I'm setting the problem, 30 over x, I'm setting it equal to -10. Now, if you are solving a problem like this and you see this variable on the bottom, we got to kick out a bottom x before we can solve for it. Okay, so I'm going to change color so we can see this one especially. How do I get that divided by x out of the problem? Okay, we can multiply it out, cancel it off. That leaves me with 30 equals negative 10x, or negative 10 times x if you want to put the dot. Now, how do I get x by itself? Hopefully you're thinking division. If you're still saying adding, you probably want to come see me. We are going to divide out that negative 10, and my x comes out to be a negative 3. Okay? If I'm going to write the answer to this guy right here, we're going to say h of negative 3, because that's my x, makes it equal negative 10. All right, let's go to number 7. Number 7, input or output? It's on the outside, so it's an output. We're going to set it equal then. So we are taking x squared minus 4 equals 21. Solving for x, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Cross it off. We have x squared makes 25. Now, we talked about, I'm going to change colors real quick. We talked about how to get rid of a square. So we are going to cancel a square with a square root. When you do this, you have to square root both sides, okay? If you do this, I am not going to give you credit. You can't square root over an equal sign, okay? It needs to be 2 small square roots, one on both sides. The square and the square root are going to cancel, leaving me with an x. What is the square root of 25? You can type it in your calculator, or you might already know that that's a 5, okay? All right, so I solved for my x. Let's write our answer. My answer is k of 5, that's my x number, makes it equal 21. All right, we got last one. Last one. I have k of 3. 3 is in the parentheses, so it's my input. That means we're going to plug it in. So I'm going to take that 3, and I'm going to put it in where the x is. So 3 squared minus 4. Notice I put 3 in parentheses. I did not write this, okay? We want to make sure we are squaring that whole number, so we need to put it in parentheses just like we did every other time, okay? All right, so if we go ahead and we do that, 3 to the second power minus 4, all in the calculator, is going to give us 5. I already have the k of 3 and the equals ready to go. I just wrote out my answer. Okay, if you need to pause the screen for just a second, copy anything you missed. We're going down to the bottom to talk about graphing, and then we'll be all set. Perfect. All right, so down here, here's how this works. Every single point on this whole graph is written out as input, comma, output. In other words, that's x, comma, y. So if I give you the input, you're looking for the point with the output matched. Okay, if I give you the output, you're looking for which input matches. Let me show you what I mean by that. First thing I'm going to do is kind of put a bunch of dots on my graph that match up with the line. All right, so we already see this one, right? If I was going to label that point, it would be 1, 4. If I was going to label this point down here, he would be 2, negative 2. But even though those are the only 2 with dots, I still have this point. I still have 4, 0. I still have this point. That's 3 and a negative 1. And there's several other points along the way, okay? So as we're looking for some of these, keep in mind that you also have a point here and here and here and here and here. You have a bunch of points all along that line, even though they're not dots, okay? All right, so let's look at the first one. Problem number 9 says I have a 2, h of 2. It's in the parentheses, so it's my input. So we are looking for a point that looks like this. 2, something. Well, if I look on my graph, I already have one of those dots, right? I already have a point that's labeled 2, what? Hopefully you see this point down here as your answer to that question, okay? So when I write the answer, all I need is negative 2. So where's the point 2, what? 2, negative 2. I don't even need this part, okay? All right, let's try number 10. So we've already used this point. Second question, number 10, I have h of 0. It's in the parentheses, so he's my input. We are looking for the point 0, comma something. It's not one of the ones we have labeled, so let's see if we can find a point that would have that. Looks like if I go over here, that's like -3, 0. That one's not going to work. If I go up here, there's a 0 here. What point is that? Hopefully you said 0, 3. So I found a point that works. Who is 0's partner? 0, comma what? 3 is our answer. Oops. 3 is our answer to that question. I don't need this. I'm just using it to help you find it. Okay? All right, we've used the 2 yellow answers so far. Let's keep looking. Problem number 11 says h of x equals 4. All right, this one's a little bit different. I have the output this time. It's on the outside of parentheses. So I am looking for the point something, comma 4. Do we have any points right now that have something, comma 4? Yes. So if I look on this graph and I want my y for, I need something that's way up here on this level. Oh, look, I have that dot. 1, comma 4 is my answer, so here's how I write it. I'd say h of 1 equals 4. All of these other ones already had their function notation. So I need to write a function notation for this one as well. Okay? All right. I want you to look at something real quick, though. H of something equals 4. Do you notice that that is the only point? This is the only point that actually gets up to this level where the 4 is, okay? There's no other dots that got that high. But I want you to watch what happens when we do the next one, okay? Problem number 12 says h of x equals 0. That's an output again. But watch what happens as I start looking for which point has 0 as the y value. Hopefully you see that we have one of those here. That's this dot. But I also have another one over here. Watch what happens if I move this line. If I say I want to be on the 0 level, there's 2 different places where I hit the graph. What do you notice else on this line, the squiggle line that's moving? There's another answer. Okay, so I'm going to leave it right there. We actually have another point. Oops, we have another point right here. It doesn't cross at 2. It crosses between 1 and 2. So we're going to go like 1.7, 1.5, 1.9, something like that. Okay, but we're going to need a couple different answers. So we're going to write it a couple times. First time I'm going to write out the -3. H of -3 goes to 0. I had h of 4 goes to 0. And we had that extra one, h of 1.5, or let's go 1.7, goes to 0, sorry. We have 3 different dots on that line. We need 3 different answers, okay? All right, we got one more problem, and then I'll pause it so you guys can write. All right, last problem says h of x equals 2. It's an output, last time, so we want to know what answer takes me to 2. Okay, so we're looking up here. We don't have any of those labeled right now, but if I look on my graph, I notice that I hit 2 twice. I have this point. Let me erase this line real quick. I have this point, which is -1, 2. Whoops. So I have one of my answers. H of -1 makes a 2. But I hopefully see that there's another one. On this one, I'm hitting 2 also, but what x took me there? What x lines up with this? Hopefully you see that it's between 1 and 2 again. Let's go like 1.3, 1.3, comma 2. Okay, so h of 1.3 takes me to 2. Decimals are okay. They do not need to be exact. So if you say 1.1, 1.5, 1.3, I don't care, as long as you're saying 1 point something and it's not a negative number, okay? All right, go ahead, pause the screen if you need anything else. Otherwise, you are ready to start your assignment.